A desert wind whispered against the ancient stones of Luxor, as the full moon cast silver light over the newly opened tomb of King Sobekotep II. Among the carved jackals and falcons, one figure lay motionless. Dr. Adrian Mallory, famed archaeologist, dead with terror frozen in his eyes. His hand clutched a strange golden scarab, glowing faintly beneath the torchlight. Moments later, Hercule Poirot arrived, summoned from Cairo. He surveyed the scene, his moustache twitching thoughtfully. "A death in a sealed tomb," he murmured. "How curious, and how impossible." Chapter 1. The Death in the Tomb. The desert night had a strange way of holding its breath before tragedy, as though the ancient sands themselves anticipated the arrival of death. On the evening Dr. Adrian Mallory perished inside the newly opened tomb of Sobekotep II, the air above Luxor trembled with a kind of ancient whisper, one that seemed to settle between the carved stone guardians and the hieroglyphic warnings etched into the tomb walls thousands of years earlier. A crescent moon hung low, shining just brightly enough to awaken the golden hues of the cliffs overlooking the Valley of the Kings. Torches flickered along the excavation site, casting long shadows that moved like spirits along the sandstone. And in the heart of that dimly lit labyrinth of tents, crates, tools, brushes, and weary archaeologists, a fatal discovery awaited the world's greatest detective. Hercule Poirot had been summoned from Cairo earlier that evening, the urgency in Lady Evelyn Hartwell's telegram impossible to ignore. "Death at Luxor site. Mallory gone. Circumstances impossible. Require your immediate expertise. Evelyn." Poirot's curiosity was instantly awakened. A death in an archaeological dig was not uncommon, yet the manner suggested, impossible, was irresistible. And so, with his small suitcase neatly packed and his moustache impeccably groomed, he travelled by motor car through miles of desert road, arriving near midnight as the wind picked up a strange, hollow wail that echoed across the sands. It was, Poirot mused, almost as though Egypt itself mourned the fallen. Upon arrival, he was met by a frantic young archaeologist named Rafik, whose torch shook visibly in his trembling hand. "Monsieur Poirot, this way, please. Dr. Mallory. He is still inside the chamber. You must see for yourself." Poirot followed, careful to keep his polished shoes free of the loose sand that seemed intent on swallowing every trace of the living. He passed through the narrow stone entrance into a corridor where torchlight danced across scenes of royal processions, burial rites, and cryptic warnings of gods best left undisturbed. Poirot slowed, studying each detail thoughtfully. "Always the ancient kings warn us, do they not?" he remarked softly. "They say, 'Enter not, O mortal, who covets what is not yours.' A very discouraging hospitality." But he continued deeper, guided by Rafik, until they reached the newly opened burial chamber, still half filled with dust from its unsealing. There, on the cold stone floor, lay the body of Dr. Adrian Mallory. He had fallen backward, arms sprawled as though seized by a sudden terror. His eyes remained open, their glassy stare fixed upon the elaborately painted ceiling above, a ceiling depicting the journey of the soul through the underworld. What drew Poirot's immediate attention, however, was the strange golden scarab clutched tightly in Mallory's right hand. It gleamed in the light of torches, its polished surface unmarred except for a faint smear of blue dust near its hinge. Poirot leaned close but resisted touching it. The smallest details mattered most, and he would disturb nothing until every particle had spoken its truth. Poirot surveyed the room in silence, his eyes narrowing slightly. There were no signs of struggle. No overturned crates, no scattered tools, no defensive wounds on the body. Mallory's expression alone held the drama, a frozen contortion of fear, as though he had seen something no man should witness. Poirot kneeled, examining the archaeologist's face, the unnatural pallor of his skin, the dryness around the lips. "Death by fright?" he murmured, unimpressed by the theatrical explanation he knew others would favor. "No, there is always another cause." He then examined the hands. The left hand bore faint traces of powder, blue like the residue on the scarab. The chamber smelled faintly of incense, dust, and something else, something metallic and acrid, barely noticeable but not naturally occurring in such an ancient room. Poirot's moustache twitched ever so slightly. A chemical scent, a modern intrusion in a place untouched for centuries. "Rafik," Poirot said quietly. "Who discovered the body?" "Lady Evelyn," Rafik answered. She insisted on being first to see the burial chamber after the seal was broken. She brought me with her. When we arrived, Dr. Mallory was already gone." "And this chamber," Poirot said, slowly turning in a full circle, "was locked from the inside?" Rafik swallowed hard. "Completely. Dr. Mallory was the only one allowed in this evening. He had the key, I swear it. The stone door was closed. We had to force it open." Poirot stepped closer to the entrance, examining the heavy stone slab that served as the door. True, it opened inward only with great effort. Fresh tool marks scratched along its edges proved it. But what intrigued him most was a faint line of blue dust leading from the inner threshold toward the sarcophagus platform, where Mallory had collapsed. The dust was so subtle it would have escaped the untrained eye, but Poirot saw it immediately, like a trail left by an invisible hand guiding him deeper into the riddle. He crouched and examined the floor. The dust was fine, almost crystalline, a substance that shimmered faintly like crushed gemstone or chemical pigment, certainly not something naturally produced by the tomb environment. Poirot's fingers hovered an inch above it, careful not to disturb the powder. "Curious," he whispered, "very curious." Rafik hovered nervously behind him. "Monsieur Poirot, some of the men believe it is the curse." Poirot rose slowly, dusting his knees with precision. "There is no curse, my friend, only crimes. And crimes, they require only the little grey cells." He tapped his forehead lightly. "Not the superstitions." But already Poirot had a dozen questions. Why had Mallory entered the tomb alone? Why had he been holding the golden scarab? Why had he shown signs of sudden suffocation without any visible injuries? Why was blue dust present? What chemical could mimic terror or breathlessness? And more puzzling still, how had the killer entered or exited a sealed chamber with no secondary passage discovered? "Hercule Poirot!" a voice called from the entrance. Lady Evelyn Hartwell appeared, pale but composed, her silk shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders despite the warmth of the night. Her voice trembled. "Inspector, thank goodness! Adrian, dear Adrian, he cannot truly be dead, can he?" Poirot inclined his head respectfully. "I am afraid so, Lady Evelyn, but do not distress yourself over the why just yet. We shall find the truth." She stepped closer to the body but did not dare touch it, her eyes fixed upon Mallory's stiff expression. "He was a brilliant man," she whispered, "but lately he had been on edge, nervous, always glancing over his shoulder. He said he felt watched inside this tomb. He said the pharaoh's spirit was unsettled." Poirot's expression remained neutral. "Did he mention any threats from the living?" She hesitated, a little too long for Poirot's liking. "No, not exactly, but he argued often with Professor Crowley. They have always been rivals. But recently, she sighed, there was a tension between them, something more than professional jealousy. Poirot tucked that information away. Crowley was already known in academic circles for his explosive temper and competitive nature. A man not easily trusted, and perhaps easily provoked. Poirot asked, "At what hour did Dr. Mallory last leave the camp?" "Around 9, she said. "He said he needed to catalogue something he found earlier. He would not tell anyone what it was. That was unlike him." Poirot's gaze drifted once more to the golden scarab. The object in Mallory's death grip. "Perhaps," he said softly, "this is what he meant." He stepped around the chamber again, inspecting every corner, every shadow. A few pots and broken ceremonial jars lay near the wall, still half buried in dust. Tools rested in a neat row where Mallory must have placed them. Nothing was overturned. Nothing suggested violence. And yet... Poirot paused, staring at the sarcophagus itself. Its lid remained closed, but not fully secured, shifted slightly, as if someone had tampered with it from inside the chamber. He stepped closer. Blue dust clung faintly to the carved crocodile head at the foot of the sarcophagus. Poirot inhaled sharply. Not a coincidence. He called Rafik. "Did anyone help Dr. Mallory move this lid earlier?" "No, monsieur. He said he would wait until morning. He never opened it." "But someone did," Poirot said, pointing. "See here. Dust disturbed, fingerprints smudged, though now useless to me without proper powder. Whoever touched this sarcophagus did so recently." Rafik gasped. Then someone must have been inside with him. Poirot shook his head gently. Not necessarily inside, but certainly in this chamber at some point before his death. He examined the stone floor around the sarcophagus. The problem is, there are no footprints leading to it, only this faint trail of blue dust leading away from it. Poirot's eyes narrowed, meaning the killer did not walk normally. Perhaps they swept their footprints. Or perhaps... He leaned closer to the dust trail, following it to a carved section of the wall depicting Anubis weighing the heart of the dead. Along the seam between two stone blocks lay a barely visible crack, freshly disturbed. Poirot's heart quickened. "Ah," he whispered, "what have we here?" He tapped the stone lightly. It gave off a hollow, resonant sound, a concealed recess, perhaps even a passage. But before he could inspect further, a panicked voice echoed from the outer corridor. "Poirot, come quickly!" It was Professor Crowley himself, sounding breathless, angry, and terrified all at once. Poirot stepped back from the wall, dust settling silently behind him. "Rafik," Poirot said calmly, "see that nobody touches Dr. Mallory's body, not even the sand upon which he lies. Tell the men, this chamber is forbidden until I return." Poirot walked toward the entrance where Crowley stood, sweating despite the coolness of the stone interior. The man's spectacles were fogged, his shirt wrinkled as though he had been pacing frantically. "You must believe me," Crowley blurted the moment Poirot approached. "I had nothing to do with it, but they will blame me. You know they will." Poirot raised a brow. "What is it that troubles you, Professor?" Crowley swallowed hard. "Someone has stolen my chemical kit. The powders, rare compounds I use to preserve artifacts, they're gone." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Does one of these powders happen to be blue?" Crowley froze. Poirot needed no verbal answer. "Come, Professor," Poirot said softly, his gaze turning metallic with certainty. "It seems your stolen chemicals have already begun to speak." Behind him, the desert wind howled through the ancient corridors. Low, mournful, almost human. The torches fluttered, and somewhere in the darkness of the tomb, a grain of blue dust drifted to the floor like the last whisper of a dead king. Poirot turned back toward Mallory's body one last time, The killer was here, he murmured, inside a sealed chamber, and they left behind a trail for Hercule Poirot to follow. His eyes gleamed. And follow it, I shall. Chapter 2. The Four Suspects. The first pale shimmer of dawn crept over the Luxor horizon as Hercule Poirot emerged from the tomb, his mind already pulling threads of logic from the tangled mystery of Dr. Mallory's impossible death. The air outside was crisp and cool, though it carried the familiar dryness of the desert. Tents rustled in the early wind, camel bells tinkled faintly from the distant settlement, and the remains of last night's torch smoke drifted like ghostly tendrils above the excavation site. Workers moved about quietly, whispering among themselves, their faces etched with fear. The rumour of a curse had already spread like wildfire. But Poirot paid no attention to superstition. His concern was human motives, human deceptions, human acts. And on this site, 4 humans stood out above all others, each bound to Dr. Mallory by strained alliances, simmering resentments, or buried secrets. After a few hours of precise, methodical rest, more mental than physical, Poirot rose, dressed with immaculate care, and prepared for the next stage of his investigation. His first objective was simple: measure the reactions, lies, and subtle tells of each principal character connected to Dr. Mallory. The murderer, no matter how clever, he murmured as he adjusted his tie, cannot perfectly disguise the flicker of guilt. And with that belief, he stepped into the morning sun. Lady Evelyn Hartwell awaited him outside her large cream-coloured tent, already dressed in crisp linen trousers and a silk blouse that fluttered lightly in the breeze. Her poise was impeccable. She carried herself with the kind of aristocratic composure that seemed carved from marble rather than flesh. Yet Poirot immediately sensed a deeper vibration beneath her stillness. An anxiety trying very hard not to show. She greeted him with a tight smile. "Inspector Poirot," she said, her voice controlled but strained by sleeplessness, "I trust your examination was thorough." "As thorough as possible under the circumstances," Poirot replied gently. "There is still much to understand, much that is bothersome." He noted the faint shadows beneath her eyes, the tremor in her hands she tried to conceal with graceful gestures. Lady Evelyn was not a woman accustomed to fear. And yet fear clung to her now like desert dust. They sat beneath the shade of her tent as the sun climbed higher. Her breakfast lay untouched on the table beside her, fruit, tea, and a half-sliced loaf of bread. Poirot examined it discreetly. People who were guilty rarely ate, but people who were afraid could not eat either. Lady Evelyn's appetite told nothing. So Poirot turned to her story. "Tell me, madame," began, "your association with Dr. Mallory. You were his financial sponsor?" "Yes," she answered, clasping her hands. "Adrian was always brilliant, but impractical. Without my backing, he would never have secured excavation rights in Luxor this year. And without access to this tomb," her voice cracked slightly. She exhaled sharply, regaining composure. "Without this dig, he believed his reputation would never recover from last year's academic controversies." Poirot leaned in. "Controversies? Ah, but I recall hearing whispers. Something about forged inscriptions?" Her eyes narrowed. "Whispers only, Inspector. Lies spread by jealous rivals. Adrian was innocent." "Someone did not think so," Poirot said, "for you funded this dig in part to help him restore his good name, no?" She hesitated, reluctant to admit it. Yes, that is true. Adrian had become desperate. He felt cornered by his detractors." She lowered her gaze, and yes, he felt threatened by Professor Crowley. You must understand, Crowley has always despised Adrian's success. Their rivalry was a constant storm. Poirot filed this away. Did Dr. Mallory ever express fear of Crowley? Or believe he would sabotage the dig? Lady Evelyn stiffened. Adrian said Crowley was jealous, but fear, no. Adrian feared only one thing lately. Poirot's eyebrow lifted. That someone in our expedition was watching him, following him, trying to prevent him from making a discovery. And did he disclose what this discovery was? No. He always said he would tell me tomorrow. She rubbed her temples, her composure crumbling. But tomorrow never came. Poirot let silence linger. People revealed themselves most in silence. Lady Evelyn's fingers twisted anxiously around her bracelet, a gesture of guilt, no, of grief. Her distress seemed real, not staged. Yet Poirot did not overlook the deeper truth. Financial motives often disguise themselves behind sorrow. If Mallory had been planning to expose forged documents or misused funds, Lady Evelyn could have lost everything. A possibility, though not yet a certainty. He rose slowly. Merci, Lady Evelyn, you have been most helpful. When Poirot stepped away from her tent, he immediately sensed someone watching him. He turned and saw Professor Bernard Crowley standing at a distance, arms folded, his silhouette tense against the sunlit space. Crowley was a tall, angular man with the posture of a hawk and the scowl of a man perpetually unimpressed. His lab coat was wrinkled, his hair messy, and dust clung to his trousers. Where Lady Evelyn was elegance, Crowley was irritation incarnate. "Poirot!" Crowley barked before the detective had even reached him. "If you're here to accuse me, spare us both the theatrics. I didn't kill Mallory." Poirot smiled mildly. "Ah, Professor Crowley, always so direct. It is refreshing, in a way." He approached leisurely. "But you misunderstand me. I accuse no one until they do me the favor of revealing themselves." Crowley grunted. "Then ask your questions and be quick about it." They walked toward the shade of Crowley's work tent, a disordered chaos of maps, broken artifacts, notebooks, and equipment scattered on every surface. A chemical kit sat open on a crate, several compartments notably empty. "You reported items stolen," Poirot said, eyeing the kit. "Yes," Crowley snapped. "My blue cobalt compound is missing, along with stabilizers. Dangerous in the wrong hands." Poirot's moustache twitched, precisely the shade of blue found on Dr. Mallory. Crowley stiffened. "I didn't do it." Poirot watched him closely. "But the chemicals are yours. I said they were stolen. And who would steal them?" Crowley paused, jaw clenching. "Someone who wanted me blamed. Someone who knew Mallory and I quarrelled last night." "About what, Professor?" Crowley let out a bitter laugh. "About everything. His childish theories about the lost courier route of Sobekotep, his refusal to share findings, his arrogance, his baseless claims that I had falsified research to undermine him." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Had you falsified anything, Professor?" Crowley glared. "No, he was paranoid. You must have heard the rumors. Mallory had become unstable, obsessed with curses, shadows, and hidden messages." He began locking his tent, carrying weapons, scribbling nonsense in his notes. And when he found something in that tomb, something he refused to show any of us, he became unbearable. Poirot absorbed every word, carefully analyzing the tone, the eyes, the posture. Crowley's anger was authentic, too authentic perhaps, but anger did not prove innocence, nor did it prove guilt. It only proved unresolved conflict. "Where were you last night?" Poirot asked softly. "In my tent," Crowley replied. "Half the night writing lecture notes, the other half cursing Mallory for breathing." He folded his arms. "If you want to question someone, ask Samir. He was the last to argue with Mallory." Poirot thanked him and walked away, though he glanced back once more. Crowley was pacing, chewing a piece of bread savagely as though it insulted him. The man was volatile, prideful, unpredictable, but perhaps too obvious. Poirot doubted such a man had the finesse to commit a murder inside a sealed tomb with chemical precision. Poirot next sought out Samir Nassar, the excavation's most seasoned local guide. He found him seated on a low stone wall overlooking the dig, his elbows resting on his knees, his posture hunched with troubled thoughts. Samir was a sturdy man in his 30s, with warm eyes darkened now by fear. He stared into the valley as though searching the sands for an answer. "Samir," Poirot said gently, "may I join you?" Samir nodded silently. "You knew Dr. Mallory for many years?" "Yes," Samir said quietly, "since I was a boy. And yet," Poirot continued, "Professor Crowley says you argued with him last night." Samir's expression tightened. "We argued, but not the way Crowley means. I warned Dr. Mallory not to enter the tomb alone. I told him he angered the spirits." Poirot folded his hands behind his back. "You believe in curses?" Samir nodded. "All of us who grew up here do. The tombs are sacred places. They are not to be disturbed lightly." "And Dr. Mallory?" He laughed, said curses were for the ignorant. Samir's voice broke with emotion. "But when he went inside that chamber, something changed. He was frightened, truly frightened." Poirot listened, noted the tremor in Samir's voice, the sincerity, the emotion. Samir was superstitious, yes, but deeply loyal to Mallory. "They will suspect you," Poirot said calmly. "I know," Samir whispered, "because I'm not English, because I feared the tomb, because I warned him. But I did not harm Dr. Mallory. I would never." Poirot believed him, instinctively but not conclusively. Samir had a motive grounded in ancient fear, but fear did not kill a man in a sealed room with chemical residue. Fear did not steal Crowley's powders. Fear did not plant evidence. No, Samir was not calculated enough for such a methodical crime. Poirot's final conversation of the morning was with Nefret Mallory, the victim's daughter, a young woman whose presence alone radiated mystery. She stood near her father's tent, arms crossed, eyes cold and sharp like obsidian. Her hair was tied back in a loose braid, her clothing practical, a desert jacket and trousers, but she carried herself with quiet defiance. As Poirot approached, she did not speak. She simply waited as though she knew this moment would come. "Mademoiselle Mallory," Poirot said softly, "my condolences." Her gaze flickered. "Thank you," she replied flatly, "but condolences won't change anything." Poirot studied her carefully. "Your father, did you get along with him?" She paused, looked away. "Sometimes." "That is not an answer." She sighed. "My father and I disagreed about many things. He refused to let me help with his research. He said archaeology was too dangerous for women. But yesterday he promised he would show me something. Something he discovered. Something important." Poirot's eyebrow rose. "And did he show you?" "No," she said sharply, "because he died before he could." Poirot tilted his head. "You seem angry, mademoiselle." She clenched her jaw. "Of course I'm angry. Everyone treated my father as if he were mad. They pushed him, mocked him, used him. And now he is dead in a tomb that should have remained sealed." Poirot allowed the silence to breathe. Nefret continued, voice softer. He told me someone wanted to stop him from revealing what he found. He kept the scarab hidden in his pocket all day. He kept checking it, like it frightened him. I told him to leave it alone, but he wouldn't. Poirot leaned in slightly. Did he tell you who threatened him? No, she said quietly, but he said he would write it down. He never did. Poirot's eyes lingered on her a long moment. Her grief was real, her anger was real. But beneath it all, there was something else. A secret, a tension, something unspoken. She turned away. Is that all, Inspector? For now, Poirot answered softly. Merci? As he walked away, Poirot mentally arranged the 4 suspects like pieces on a chessboard, each one carrying motive, opportunity, or suspicion. Lady Evelyn, with financial entanglements and undisclosed anxieties. Cruelly, with stolen chemicals, a bitter rivalry, and explosive temper. Samir, whose superstition and warnings cast him in the wrong light. And Nefret, whose emotional storms and hidden tensions with her father were yet to be unravelled. 4 suspects, 4 motives, 4 interlocking truths. Yet only one had entered or orchestrated entry into a sealed tomb to kill Dr. Mallory. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he gazed back toward the tomb entrance, sunlight gleaming off the ancient stone. The answers, he whispered to himself, lie not in the shadows of dead kings, but in the hearts of the living. And Poirot, tapping his fingertips together with quiet satisfaction, felt the first pieces of the puzzle fall into place. Chapter 3. Whispers Beneath the Sands. The evening wind slithered across the desert like a living thing, carrying with it the cool breath of night and the unsettling murmur of sand shifting endlessly. Lanterns glowed across the Luxor camp as the excavation team gathered for another tense night, their shadows long and trembling on the tent walls. Hercule Poirot, after a meticulous inspection of Dr. Hargrove's personal tent, stepped back into the open, the scent of dust and papyrus still clinging to his coat. The camp had begun to settle into an uneasy hush, broken only by the occasional clang of tools or the soft rumble of a generator. Yet beneath this superficial calm, the detective sensed the trembling of secrets, ready to burst forth like a tomb long sealed. Poirot paused, observing the workers shuffle past. Their eyes avoided his, their faces pale, even in the warm light. Death, strange, sudden, and ritualistic, had a way of unravelling the bravest of men. He walked slowly toward the excavation pit, where the giant entrance stone of the tomb of Ankana II loomed like a watching guardian. The hieroglyphs carved into its face seemed to flicker under the desert moon, telling stories of ancient curses and vengeful queens. Poirot did not believe in such things, but he believed wholeheartedly in the human mind's capacity for cruelty when greed, jealousy, or ambition pressed hard enough. From below, Colonel Vance appeared, climbing out of the pit with a soldier's deliberate precision. "Poirot," he greeted, wiping sweat from his brow. "We've secured the inner chamber, as you requested. The sarcophagus hasn't been touched. No signs of tampering." "Très bien," Poirot replied softly. "And our suspects?" "All accounted for, though some less willing than others." Poirot nodded. He expected no less. "We must speak to them again, mon ami. Each carries a motive as heavy as these ancient stones." As he and Vance walked toward the central tent, Poirot's mind sifted through the fragments of evidence. Dr. Hargrove's body had been discovered inside the sealed chamber, struck down with a blunt object and arranged with ritualistic precision. The golden scarab amulet, centerpiece of the excavation, had vanished. Only a smear of dark resin remained on the sarcophagus lid, a resin used in ancient embalming processes. To the untrained mind, it suggested a supernatural hand. To Poirot, however, it suggested opportunity. A killer, he reasoned, had staged the scene with intention. Inside the central tent, 3 of the remaining team members sat in uneasy silence. Professor Lydia Strathmore, the brilliant but fiercely competitive archaeologist, Graham Sinclair, the financier whose investments hung precariously on the expedition's success, and Mira Caldwell, the young artifact restorer whose quiet demeanour masked an undercurrent of suppressed anxiety. Poirot folded his arms behind his back. "Mes amis," he began gently, "I ask for only your honesty. Dr. Hargrove's death is a tragic blow to your work, your reputations, and perhaps your hearts. But to solve this crime, I must understand the truth each of you hides." The lantern flickered as Lydia leaned forward, her expression taut. "You think one of us killed him, that we would sabotage our own discovery?" Poirot raised a brow. "Non, madam. I think one of you believed the discovery belonged more to them than to the unfortunate Dr. Hargrove." Lydia bristled, but Poirot continued. "Your rivalry with him was well known." "It was academic rivalry," she snapped. "He wanted to rush the excavation. I wanted to preserve the site properly. That hardly makes me a murderer." Poirot clasped his hands. "Madame Strathmore, in matters of pride, even a scholar can be, how do you say, spirited?" Graham Sinclair exhaled sharply. "This is absurd. The man's death jeopardizes everything. Years of funding, negotiations, artifacts intended for museums, ruined. Why would I sabotage the very thing I invested in?" "Perhaps," Poirot replied quietly, "because you learned that your financier board threatened to cut your funding unless this discovery proved to be of exceptional value. Ancana's tomb was your salvation, monsieur. What if Dr. Hargrove intended to keep the most valuable artifacts for academic institutions, rather than private donors ready to reward you handsomely?" Sinclair's jaw tensed. He looked away. Mira Caldwell, normally silent, spoke, in a trembling voice. "Poirot, I know the others are under pressure, but Dr. Hargrove, he wasn't a bad man. Strict, yes. Ambitious, certainly, but he cared about the work." She swallowed hard. "I don't believe any of us would go so far." Poirot turned to her. "And yet you, mademoiselle, had intimate access to every artifact. You alone cleaned the scarab before it disappeared." Mira's lips quivered. "You think I stole it?" "I think," Poirot said gently, "that you know something you have not yet shared." Her eyes lowered. A tear clung to her lash before falling. Before she could speak further, a sudden cry echoed from outside, a panicked shrill shout that tore through the tent flaps. Colonel Vance immediately drew his revolver. Poirot followed swiftly as they rushed out into the cooling night. A young excavator stumbled toward them, breathless, pointing back toward the pit. "Sir, Colonel, the inner chamber, it's open." Poirot's heart snapped into sharp focus. "Impossible," he whispered. "It was sealed." They hurried down the slope, lanterns bobbing wildly. The stone seal that had stood firm for millennia now hung crooked, pried open by brute force. Sand poured from the gap like blood from a wound. Colonel Vance cursed under his breath. "Who opened it?" "No one from my team," the excavator insisted. "We were instructed to stay clear." Poirot approached the opening, his expression grave. "Someone returns to the scene of their crime," he murmured, "or someone fears what we will discover." Inside, the air was unnaturally still. Poirot stepped carefully across the threshold. The chamber remained dim, illuminated only by the thin spear of lantern light that pierced the ancient darkness. Then he saw it. The sarcophagus lid was ajar. not as it had been when Dr. Hargrove's body lay atop it, but pushed open, just enough to reveal the suggestion of movement within. Poirot inhaled sharply, his mind racing. "Colonel," he whispered, "bring light." As Vance raised the lantern higher, a soft rustling came from within the stone coffin. Poirot felt every hair along his neck stiffen. For a fleeting moment, he considered the possibility of superstition returning in full force. But logic anchored him. He gripped the lid and pushed it open fully. Inside, instead of the expected mummified remains, lay something else entirely. A folded scrap of modern parchment, fresh ink, a message. And beneath it, a small pool of dark resin, the same found on the sarcophagus earlier. Poirot lifted the note. The handwriting was hurried, jagged. "Stop digging, or we all share Hargrove's fate." Poirot closed his eyes for a brief moment, then exhaled. "Ah," he whispered, "the killer grows bold, or afraid." Colonel Vance stared at the empty sarcophagus. "The mummy's gone?" Poirot corrected him softly. "No, mon ami, it was never here. Our killer has staged everything from the beginning, and now." He looked toward the shadows dancing along the chamber walls. "Now they show their desperation." The chamber fell silent, heavy with dread, and somewhere above them, beyond the lip of the tomb entrance, footsteps retreated quickly into the night. Chapter 4. The Queen's Silent Curse. The night deepened over Luxor, the sky unfolding into a black velvet tapestry pricked with ancient stars, silent witnesses to the secrets buried beneath the desert sands. The camp had descended into a fearful quiet, its workers whispering among themselves about curses, vanishing mummies, and ominous threats left inside royal sarcophagi. Poirot, however, stood outside the entrance of the tomb with arms neatly folded, eyes narrowed in contemplation. The wind carried fine grains of sand around his polished shoes, swirling like restless spirits. He ignored them. His mind was unravelling threads, not myths. Colonel Vance approached him with brisk steps. "The guards have reported no one leaving the camp," he said, his voice taut. "But someone definitely forced the stone seal open. Whoever it was knew exactly what they were doing." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed, this was no act of panic, mon ami. It was calculated, designed to frighten, to mislead. The killer seeks control of the narrative." He tapped his temple. "But they forget. Nothing escapes these little grey cells." The two men re-entered the tomb. Lanterns had been placed along the passage, their dim golden glow brushing the carved walls, bringing strange life to the hieroglyphs of Queen Ancana II's journey into the netherworld. They reached the inner chamber, where the sarcophagus stood open like a mouth frozen mid-scream. The threatening note lay in Poirot's coat pocket, as a constant reminder of the unseen hand manipulating events in the shadows. Poirot examined the stone floor carefully. "Observe, Colonel," he murmured. "Footprints, only one distinct set. The killer worked alone." He knelt, pointing to a smear near the base of the sarcophagus. "And again, this resin, but in greater quantity than before." Vance frowned. "From the embalming materials, yes?" "No," Poirot corrected softly. "It is modern. A synthetic blend used in artifact restoration to bind fragile surfaces. A product not found in ancient burial rituals." He paused dramatically. "Only one member of our camp uses such a substance daily." "Mira Caldwell," Vance muttered, jaw tightening. "Exactement." The colonel's hand shifted toward his holster. "Should I detain her?" Poirot held up a finger. "Patience, mon ami. Guilt is not proven by proximity to evidence, but by the logic of motive and opportunity. We must understand why she would stage such theatrics, if she did." Vance exhaled, frustrated, but trusting Poirot's process. What next? Poirot stood, brushing dust from his knee. We revisit the living. He paused. And perhaps the dead. When they returned to the camp, Poirot called for Mira. She entered the tent with hesitant steps, her eyes red-rimmed from sleeplessness. "Colonel Vance said you needed me," she whispered. Poirot gestured for her to sit. "Mademoiselle, there is no accusation here, only questions. You understand the importance, oui?" She nodded shakily. Poirot's voice softened. "Tell me, Mira, the resin found in the chamber, does it belong to you?" Her fingers twisted in her lap. I use it to repair minor fractures on fragile pieces. Dr. Hargrove gave me permission." Her voice trembled. "But I haven't taken anything into the inner chamber since the day we first opened it." "Yet someone did," Poirot said gently. "And they handled the sarcophagus with this resin on their hands, or perhaps used it intentionally." A tear slid down her cheek. "Poirot! I swear I didn't touch that coffin." She swallowed hard. "But I did see someone near the supply crates earlier. Someone who shouldn't have been there." Poirot's brow arched. "Who?" She hesitated, but fear finally cracked her silence. "Professor Strathmore." Colonel Vance stiffened. "Strathmore. She insisted she never approached the tomb after the body was found." Poirot murmured, "People insist on many things, mon ami." Before more could be said, the tent flap burst open. Graham Sinclair rushed in, breathless and sweating. "Poirot! You need to come, now!" The detective exchanged a wary glance with Vance. "Another tragedy?" "Worse," Sinclair choked. "Another message." The entire excavation team gathered at the edge of the camp where the tool sheds stood like silent sentinels. A piece of linen, fresh, white and torn from an excavation tarp, hung pinned to the wall by a ceremonial dagger. Ancient Egyptian designs glinted along the blade. Poirot stepped forward. With gloved fingers, he removed the linen. Written in a bold black scrawl, "The Queen awakens! This desert will take more blood before it sleeps." Gasps erupted among the workers. One whispered a prayer. Another muttered about curses growing angry. Poirot, however, examined the dagger. "This blade," he said, "is from the sealed artifact chest. Only 3 people possess the key to that lock." Vance growled. "Hargrove had one, Strathmore has one, and Sinclair has the last." All eyes shifted to Sinclair. His face went pale. "Are you accusing me?" Poirot held up a hand. "Non, I observe only facts." But facts, he knew, rarely stood alone. They pointed, connected, revealed. Mira stepped beside Poirot. "There's more," she whispered. "Look." Behind the shed, half buried in the sand, lay faint drag marks, something heavy pulled in the direction of the dunes. Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Something moved," he murmured. "Or someone." He followed the tracks a few paces until they vanished into the shifting sands. Not enough evidence, but enough to raise questions. When he returned to the group, Strathmore stood rigid, arms crossed, fury blazing in her eyes. "Poirot, I will not be scapegoated by this circus of superstitions. The tomb is cursed, yes, but by ignorance, not spirits." "Perhaps," Poirot replied smoothly. "Yet curses often hide human hands." She glared. "Are you suggesting I staged these threats?" "I suggest nothing," Poirot said calmly, "but I observe, madame, that you alone advocated for halting the excavation at once. Your academic reputation is at stake. A scandal of this magnitude would ruin a lifetime of work." Strathmore's voice cracked with emotion. "You think I want any of this? Hargrove dead? Our discovery tainted? No." Poirot tilted his head. Then why were you seen by Mademoiselle Caldwell at the supply crates this evening? Strathmore blinked, stunned. What? That's impossible. I was in my tent all night. Mira stepped back, fear tightening her features. Sinclair muttered under his breath, "Someone's lying." Poirot clasped his hands. Someone is lying, and with each new curse, written in modern ink, the lies grow more desperate. He stepped closer to the group, lowering his voice. "Mes amis, the killer is among you, and they know their time grows short." Above them, the wind howled across the dunes like the whisper of a long-dead queen. The desert listened and waited. Chapter 5. Shadows of the living, echoes of the dead. The sun rose reluctantly over the desert, its early rays stretching across the dunes like fingers searching for truth buried beneath centuries of silence. The camp stirred with unease rather than routine. Conversations were hushed. Workers avoided one another's gaze. Every footstep felt watched. Hercule Poirot stood by the edge of the excavation pit, his silhouette cast long across the sand as he surveyed the camp with cool precision. The night's threats still lingered in the air, clinging like the desert heat. Yet Poirot's mind worked briskly, untangling lies wrapped in fear. Colonel Vance approached, looking as if he hadn't slept. "Poirot, the men are spooked. Half of them are asking to leave. They believe the curse is real." Poirot nodded slowly, eyes narrowing. Fear is a powerful ally to the one who wishes to distract, but we cannot let superstition cloud the investigation. A human hand orchestrates these events. His gaze moved toward the tents where Lydia Strathmore, Graham Sinclair, and Mira Caldwell lingered. Their expressions tense, guarded, and the hour to test them has arrived. Vance folded his arms. "What do you propose?" Poirot stepped closer, voice low and sharp. "A confrontation. Separate interviews are no longer sufficient. We need them together where lies clash against one another like swords." The colonel nodded and went to gather the group. Inside the main briefing tent, the suspects took their seats around a long wooden table. Lydia sat with her chin lifted defiantly. Sinclair drummed his fingers anxiously. Mira fidgeted with the edge of her sleeve, her heartbeat nearly visible. Poirot entered last, his presence commanding silence. "Mes amis," he began, "we stand at the midpoint of a mystery, woven with deception, ambition, and fear. But one thing is certain. Dr. Hargrove's killer stands among us." Lydia scoffed. "You've been implying that since his death." Poirot raised a finger. "No, madame, I have been observing. And now I will present what I know." All eyes sharpened. Poirot retrieved 3 items from his coat pocket: the threatening note from the sarcophagus, the scrap pinned with the dagger, and a vial of synthetic resin. He placed them on the table one by one. "First, this resin," he said. "It is modern, used only by one person here, Mademoiselle Caldwell." Mira inhaled sharply, eyes wide with fear. Poirot continued before she could speak. "But," he said, "it also appears on the handle of the ceremonial dagger used to pin the second message. Look closely." He handed the blade to Vance, who nodded. "The resin is smeared, not dried by natural use. It was applied deliberately to frame Mira." Gasps rippled across the room. Mira's lips parted. "Poirot, you believe me?" Poirot bowed his head gently. "Of course, mademoiselle. Only a fool would think you staged such a clumsy imitation of an ancient threat. You would know too well the difference." Lydia's eyes flashed with irritation. "So you're accusing one of us?" Poirot nodded slowly. "Oui." He turned toward Sinclair. "Let us begin with motive. Monsieur Sinclair stands to lose the most financially. If Hargrove intended the scarab to go to a museum, Sinclair's investors would not profit. A financial ruin? Perhaps motive for murder, no? Sinclair bristled. That's speculation. Indeed, Poirot said calmly. And yet, you also had the key to the artifact chest from which the dagger was taken. Sinclair's face reddened. You think I killed him? That makes no sense. Poirot shifted his gaze to Lydia. Professor Strathmore, your rivalry with Dr. Hargrove is legendary. Years of competing for academic superiority. Discovering Ancana's tomb together must have been torture. Lydia tightened her jaw. He was reckless. He endangered the site. Or, Poirot countered, he threatened your legacy. Imagine the headlines, Hargrove discovers lost Egyptian queen, your name forgotten. Silence fell like a blade. Poirot walked slowly around the table. But ambition and rivalry alone cannot solve this. We must look at details. Lies. Inconsistencies. He stopped behind Lydia. You claim you never visited the supply crates last night. That's right. Poirot raised a brow. Yet Mira saw you. You were in your tent, you say. He paused. Curious, then, that your boots were covered in fresh resin. The same resin that comes from Mira's station. I checked this morning. Lydia froze, stunned. Sinclair turned toward her in shock. Is this true? Poirot continued mercilessly. And the threatening notes, the handwriting is angled forward, heavy pressure, European pen style. Not common among restoration students. His finger pointed sharply at Lydia, but extremely common among scholars trained at Oxford. Lydia's face drained of colour. But why, Mira whispered. Why kill Dr. Hargrove? Poirot leaned forward, eyes glinting. Because Hargrove had discovered something he did not share. Something he intended to publish without you. From his coat, Poirot produced a folded set of paper, Hargrove's private notes. Lydia erupted. Where did you get those? In his tent, Poirot allowed himself a small smile, tucked beneath his cot. He placed them on the table. The notes contained detailed sketches of the scarab, but more importantly, translations of hieroglyphs found on the inner doorway. One section circled repeatedly. The Queen's true resting chamber lies beneath the false tomb. Poirot tapped the page. Hargrove discovered a hidden passage. He planned to reopen it today, alone. Sinclair inhaled sharply. A second tomb? Poirot nodded. Which would bring fame beyond compare. But he didn't share the discovery with Professor Strathmore. Not yet. Poirot's voice dropped. She feared he would overshadow her forever. Lydia stood suddenly, chair scraping against the floor. He betrayed me. After everything, I helped him, guided him, supported this expedition for years. And he planned to steal the greatest discovery for himself. Mira's voice trembled. So you killed him? Lydia's hands curled into fists. I confronted him that night. We argued. He insulted me. Said I lacked the brilliance to interpret the hieroglyphs. Said my career was ending. Her voice shook. I didn't mean to kill him. I struck him once. He fell. His head hit the edge of the sarcophagus. Sinclair swallowed hard. And the staging, the curse? Lydia's breathing intensified. I had to make it look supernatural, to stop the excavation. If the second chamber was found, Hargrove would still be credited. I couldn't let that happen. Her voice broke. It was supposed to scare you all away, not turn into this. Poirot spoke softly. Murder never ends as one imagines. The Colonel stepped forward, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. Professor Lydia Strathmore, you are under arrest. Lydia did not resist. Her eyes drifted toward the pit, haunted by the weight of her choices. As Vance escorted her away, Poirot turned to the others. The desert keeps many secrets, but not from Hercule Poirot. The wind swept across the camp once more, no longer whispering threats, but carrying away the last traces of the Queen's alleged curse. Chapter 6. The hidden chamber breathed dawn, crept across the desert like a slow-spreading fire, staining the dunes gold and casting long, wavering shadows across the excavation site. The arrest of Professor Lydia Strathmore had rippled through the camp like an earthquake. Some workers whispered prayers, others prepared to pack their belongings, and still others, like Mira and Sinclair, lingered with haunted expressions, as though the truth had only deepened the mystery rather than settled it. Hercule Poirot, however, was far from satisfied. A murderer had confessed, yes, but confessions were merely stories. And stories, Poirot knew, did not always match the truth hidden beneath the first layer of dust. He stood near the entrance of the tomb, allowing the warming sunlight to touch his face while his mind churned. Lydia had admitted to killing Dr. Hargrove, yet Poirot sensed her confession had been incomplete, perhaps even convenient. Pieces did not align. Why had she panicked and staged the scene so theatrically if the blow had been an accident? Why had the threatening notes continued even after her arrest? And most importantly, who opened the inner chamber in the middle of the night if she had been asleep in her tent, surrounded by witnesses? Colonel Vance approached, boots crunching over sand. "We've secured her in a separate tent with guards posted outside. She isn't speaking anymore." Poirot nodded. "A pity, but she has already told us enough." He tapped his temple. "Enough to show what she hides." Vance frowned. "Poirot, she admitted she struck Hargrove." "Yes, but did she kill him? That, mon ami, is the question." Poirot's eyes glinted in the sunlight. "Come, there is more we must examine." He descended into the tomb, Vance following close behind. The inner chamber greeted them with its eternal, eerie silence. The sarcophagus loomed open, empty except for the indentation where the body had once rested. Poirot moved with light steps, examining the floor once more, noting every mark. "Observe," Poirot said, kneeling. "Dr. Hargrove's blood splatter shows 2 impacts, one from a blunt strike, yes, but the second—" He pointed to a faint stain near the sarcophagus's edge. "It's consistent not with falling backward, but being pushed against the stone." Vance stiffened. "So she lied?" "Partially," Poirot said. "She struck him, but someone else finished the act." Vance's voice deepened. "Someone else was in the tomb that night?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, Colonel, everyone has been in this tomb, but only one person had the strength to move the sarcophagus lid alone. Lydia is brilliant, yes, but not physically formidable. Another hand assisted or interfered." Vance rubbed his temples. "That means the murder wasn't hers alone." "Exactement." Poirot stood, dusting his trousers. "Which leads us to the hidden passage Dr. Hargrove discovered. Come." They moved toward the back wall of the chamber, where intricate carvings depicted Queen Ancana's journey through the underworld. Poirot traced his fingers over the stone until he found it, an almost imperceptible indentation in the shape of the scarab amulet. "The key," Poirot whispered, "and now the lock." Sinclair had joined them quietly, his face pale. "Poirot, what are you saying? That Hargrove found something beyond this chamber?" Poirot turned, one eyebrow arching. "Monsieur Sinclair, you financed this excavation. Surely you are curious." Sinclair swallowed hard. "Curious, yes, but after what happened?" Poirot pressed the indentation. A deep grinding sound echoed through the chamber as the wall shifted, grains of sand cascading like a miniature waterfall. A hidden passageway revealed itself, exhaling cold air that smelled of ancient stone and forgotten rituals. Sinclair staggered back. Vance's hand went to his pistol. Poirot stepped in calmly. The tomb behind the tomb, the true resting place of the Queen. This is what Dr. Hargrove sought to reveal. They descended the narrow steps, their lanterns casting trembling light across the corridor. Hieroglyphs lined the walls, more elaborate and pristine than any in the upper chamber. The passage sloped downward until it opened into a circular chamber, silent, untouched, impossibly well preserved. Poirot paused at the threshold. This chamber felt different, sacred, heavy with centuries of secrets. At its centre lay a sleek black sarcophagus adorned with gold, larger and far more ornate than the one above. The air grew colder as they approached. Sinclair whispered, "Is that Queen Ancana?" Poirot nodded. Her true burial place, protected by false tombs and misleading passages. They moved closer, but Poirot raised a hand sharply. "Stop!" Vance froze. "What now?" Poirot pointed to the sand around the sarcophagus. There were footprints, fresh ones. Sinclair's voice cracked. "Someone was here recently." Poirot examined them carefully. Someone with a slight drag in their left foot. His smile was thin and sharp, just like Monsieur Sinclair. Sinclair's face drained of colour. "Poirot! Wait, you can't possibly think—" "But I can, monsieur," Poirot said softly. "And I do. You visited this chamber before us. You knew of its existence, which means Dr. Hargrove confided in you before anyone else." Sinclair's breath shuddered. He told me only after he translated the final glyphs. He trusted me more than Lydia." "Ah," Poirot said, stepping closer. "And trust begets opportunity. You argued. He threatened to withdraw your share of credit and funding. You panicked. You struck him, yes, but not hard enough to kill him." Vance stared at Sinclair in disbelief. "So, you finished the job?" Sinclair's voice broke. "I didn't mean to. I swear. He stumbled after Lydia hit him. I tried to steady him. He slipped. Hit his head again. It happened so fast, I thought." Poirot completed softly that if Lydia took the blame, your future would be safe. Sinclair collapsed onto his knees, trembling. "I staged the second note, the dagger, the footprints in the sand. I wanted the curse to seem real, so no one would look too closely." Poirot sighed, folding his arms. "But guilt, monsieur, is a poor artist. It always leaves imperfections." Vance stepped forward, cuffs ready. "Graham Sinclair, you are under arrest." Sinclair wept, his voice echoing in the sacred chamber. As they led him away, Poirot remained behind for a moment, standing alone before the Queen's sarcophagus. The lantern's faint glow shimmered across the golden carvings. He whispered into the quiet, "Your Majesty, your secrets have cost blood again, but no more." The chamber swallowed his words whole, as silent and eternal as the desert itself. Chapter 7. The Chamber of Whispers. The next morning rose with a pallid sun struggling through the dusty haze that forever hovered above Luxor's ancient sands, casting long, spectral shadows across the excavation site. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed despite the desert's cruelty, entered the tomb once more, accompanied only by the echo of his patent leather shoes striking the stone floor. It was cooler here, almost too cool, as if the air had been drained by centuries of silence. Overnight, he had allowed himself little rest. Instead, he revisited every scrap of conversation, every conflicting expression, every small tremor of the suspects' voices. Something was changing. Some unseen force had begun to accelerate events. First the death of Lord Winthrop, then the fired bullet in the tent, and now the whispered rumour spreading among the workers that the curse of the scarab had awakened. For Poirot, superstition was merely a veil for human motives, yet he sensed that fear itself had become an instrument someone was wielding with precision. He approached the newly revealed antechamber, the Chamber of Whispers, as Dr. Nadine Hawthorne had christened it the night before, and stood before the carved walls. Strange figures danced across the sandstone, priests with elongated fingers, a scarab framed by rays of light, and a kneeling figure bound in rope. At the centre lay a shallow depression shaped eerily like a human silhouette. Poirot examined the carvings closely. Symbols repeated in a pattern, 3 lines, then a crescent, then a circle. He placed a gloved hand on the cold surface and murmured, "This is not merely a tomb, it is a narrative." Nadine entered behind him, her breath unsteady. "These carvings aren't ordinary funerary markings," she whispered. "They depict a judgment, one reserved for traitors who attempted to steal from the pharaoh." Poirot's eyes sparkled. Ah, so even in ancient times greed was punished with, how do you say, theatrical flair. As they examined the chamber, a low grinding sound echoed. The workers froze. Dust trickled from the ceiling. Someone, had triggered a concealed mechanism. Poirot stepped back as a slab of stone slowly slid open along the north wall, revealing a narrow corridor filled with stale, heavy air. The scent was metallic, ancient. This was not opened during the excavation, Nadine muttered, fear edging her voice. No, Poirot replied softly. It was opened tonight, by someone who has accessed this tomb without permission. He crouched and inspected the sand near the entrance. The footprints were fresh, narrow, deep at the heel, a man who walked with nervous haste. Poirot lifted a small object stuck in the pressed sand, a rusted metal pin from a European-style boot. Not an artifact, not a worker's sandal, someone from the camp. When they returned above ground to confront the team, tension had tightened like a drawn bow. Lord Harrington paced with the agitation of a man who had lost his footing in a once-controlled situation. "What now, Poirot?" he snapped, lighting another cigarette with trembling fingers. The detective held up the metal pin. "One of you was in the tomb last night. One of you opened a passage that had been sealed for thousands of years." Dr. Samuels, always the rational one, scoffed. "Are you accusing us of sneaking into the tomb during a sandstorm? Absurd!" But his voice wavered. Lady Beatrice Winthrop, pale yet poised, clutched her shawl closer as if cold. Is it possible that Lord Winthrop opened it? I mean, before the tragedy?" she asked. Poirot shook his head. "No, madame. That section was sealed until last night. Whoever opened it did so knowing exactly what they sought." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Fear, Poirot thought, had a way of loosening tongues. Soon someone would slip. Poirot requested that each member of the team surrender their boots. His insistence infuriated Harrington, but he complied. When Poirot compared the metal pin to the boots on the table, he found his answer immediately. One pair, Dr. Samuels's heavy working boots, was missing a pin on the left heel. Samuels paled. "They were defective," he stammered. "The pin could have fallen off anywhere." Poirot approached him slowly. "But not anywhere, mon ami. It fell off inside a chamber no one else entered last night." The group erupted with accusations. Harrington barked, "Samuels! What were you doing in there, looking for treasure?" Samuels slammed his fist on the table. "No, I was trying to verify something Lord Winthrop hid." The room froze. Poirot leaned closer. Explain. Samuel swallowed hard, sweat glistening at his temples. A week before his death, Winthrop discovered an inscription that he concealed from the rest of us. I overheard him speaking with someone in his tent, someone he trusted. They spoke of the Scarab Key, something said to unlock the Pharaoh's sealed judgment chamber. I didn't know if it was real, but after his death, the temptation to check the tomb myself was overwhelming. Harrington erupted again. You absolute fool! Going alone into the tomb could have killed you. Samuels trembled. I only wanted to see if Winthrop's missing journal page corresponded to the carvings. Poirot's ears sharpened. Missing journal page? He had not been informed of such a loss. Lady Beatrice bit her lip. Lord Winthrop kept meticulous notes, but after his death, one page was torn out. The detective folded his arms, thinking, so we have a missing journal page, a secret inscription, and 2 clandestine movements in the night. The shot fired earlier, and now a hidden chamber opened. Someone was searching, perhaps more desperately than before, and someone else, perhaps the same person, had fired at Poirot. No mere panic, no superstition, a plan. Poirot returned to the tomb for a second examination, this time alone. He needed the quiet. As he stepped into the newly opened passage, he noticed something that Samuels, in his nervousness, had overlooked. Thin, deliberate scratches on the stone near the hinge, a modern tool scraping a path. Someone had tried to force the mechanism earlier, perhaps days ago, but had failed. Meaning the person who opened it last night had discovered the correct trigger. Poirot traced the carvings with a fingertip. He noticed that one crescent symbol was deeper than the others. A button, disguised. When pressed, a low mechanical groan vibrated through the floor. Poirot smiled. So simple, mon ami. So theatrical. Inside the passage, the air was suffocatingly thick and stale. Poirot lit a lantern. Shadows leapt across the narrow walls. After several minutes of careful walking, the corridor opened into a small chamber, circular, with walls etched with curses and warnings. At the centre lay a pedestal, upon which rested a stone tablet broken in 2. Poirot lifted the larger fragment. It bore a single line of hieroglyphs beside the scarab symbol. Nadine later translated it. He who steals the pharaoh's secret shall be judged in shadow, and the scarab shall claim his breath. But Poirot saw something else. Modern pencil markings in the margins. Someone had been here before the tomb was sealed by the archaeological team. Someone who had translated the inscription privately. He found a small scrap of paper wedged beneath the stone slab. When he unfolded it, his breath sharpened. A fragment of Lord Winthrop's missing journal page, and scribbled hastily in English, "If anyone finds this, do not trust." The rest was torn. Poirot exhaled slowly, the weight of revelation sinking upon him like the desert night. Someone among them was walking in lies. Someone who had known the secret before the tomb even opened. He straightened his tie, pocketed the fragment, and whispered into the darkness, "The truth comes closer, and mon ami, your shadow grows." Chapter 8. Echoes Beneath the Sand. The midday sun beat down upon the excavation camp with an unforgiving glare, turning the tents into ovens of trapped heat and frayed nerves. Hercule Poirot sat beneath a small canvas awning, the fragment of Lord Winthrop's journal page resting on the table before him, like a silent witness refusing to reveal its full truth. The torn sentence, "Do not trust," haunted him, circling his thoughts like a vulture, waiting for clarity to falter. Who had Winthrop feared? Who among this select group had earned the desperate warning of a man moments away from murder? Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly, connecting threads invisible to others. Each suspect seemed to grow heavier with suspicion. Dr. Samuels, driven by academic greed and his late-night trespass. Colonel Harrington, whose hostility masked something far more volatile. Nadine, whose brilliance bordered on obsession. And Lady Beatrice, who carried grief that felt staged at moments, too delicate, too conveniently placed. To untangle their motives, Poirot needed not only logic, but an understanding of fear, the kind of fear that manipulates people into dangerous acts. As he leaned back, gazing at the shimmering heat rising from the sand, Nadine approached with a stiffness that betrayed her attempts at calm. "Poirot," she said softly, "we need to talk, privately." She guided him toward the ridge overlooking the site. There, with no one close enough to overhear, she revealed a secret kept too long. "Lord Winthrop was not just my colleague," she whispered, eyes fixed on the distant dunes. "He trusted me. He asked me to assist him with a particular translation, one he made me swear not to discuss." Poirot raised an eyebrow. Because it concerned the scarab? Her silence was confirmation. She pulled a folded paper from her coat. It was a rubbing, taken from a different section of the tomb than any officially documented. Winthrop discovered a secondary inscription, she explained, hidden beneath a layer of plaster. It warned not of treasure, but of a guardian. Something or someone who protected a secret of the pharaoh. Poirot examined the symbols with intense focus. "Why did you not share this earlier?" Nadine hesitated. Because he told me someone in the camp was watching him. He wouldn't say who, but he became paranoid in his final days." Poirot noted her trembling hands. Was it fear or guilt? Before he could question further, a deafening shout tore through the silence. They raced back to camp, sand spraying beneath their boots, until they reached the center tent, where Harrington and Samuels were shouting over each other like dogs fighting over a bone. On the table lay an open crate, one that Winthrop had kept locked since the start of the expedition. Inside was a velvet-wrapped object, the golden scarab artifact itself. But it was damaged, cracked down, the center as if struck with tremendous force. Samuels was white with shock. "It wasn't like this when I last saw it," he cried. Harrington jabbed a finger at him. "You've been sneaking around. You were in the tomb last night. And now this relic, this key, is broken." Poirot stepped forward, running a fingertip along the crack. It wasn't random. The break had occurred at a hinge, meaning the scarab had once opened, revealing something inside. Something now missing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot announced softly, "someone has removed whatever was hidden within this artifact." Beatrice gasped, paling further. "But why destroy it?" Poirot looked around the tent, his gaze sharp as steel. "Because the thief wished us to believe no secret ever existed. A clever misdirection, but not clever enough." He turned the scarab over and noticed faint dust gathered unevenly. Recent movement. Someone had broken it only hours earlier. As tension thickened, a sudden sandstorm swept across the camp, the sky turning a sickly orange as wind howled like an ancient lament. Workers scrambled, tents strained, and visibility dropped to mere inches. Harrington took charge, barking orders to secure the site, but Poirot knew chaos was the perfect cover for a desperate culprit. As the storm intensified, he slipped toward the tomb entrance, lantern in hand. The wind lashed at him, pushing sand into his eyes, yet he pressed onward. At the threshold of the tomb, where darkness met the fury of the desert, he spotted footprints, fresh, leading inward, smaller than a man's boot, a woman's. Poirot's heart quickened. Someone had gone inside during the storm, hoping to use the distraction to search further. He descended into the tomb, the storm's roar fading into a heavy silence. His lantern flickered along the stone walls, casting trembling shadows like ghosts awakened by intrusion. In the Chamber of Whispers, he found a scattering of sand that had not been present earlier, along with a small object glinting beneath the lantern light. A brooch. Gold, fashioned in the likeness of a lotus blossom, Lady Beatrice's. Poirot picked it up slowly. Had she come here alone, or had someone planted it to frame her? As he pondered, a faint sound drifted from deeper within the tomb, a soft, uneven breathing. Poirot stiffened. He extinguished the lantern, plunging the chamber into darkness. He listened. Another breath. A shuffle of cloth. Someone was here. He stepped silently toward the corridor, but before he could advance, a figure lunged out of the shadows. Poirot collided with the stone wall, pain shooting through his shoulder. The attacker fled past him, footsteps echoing rapidly through the passageway. Poirot relit the lantern and gave chase, but the storm's screeching wind drowned out all direction. By the time he reached the tomb entrance, the figure had vanished, swallowed by the swirling sand. Poirot stared into the storm, heart steady, though the danger had escalated. Someone was willing to kill to protect the secret. And they were growing bolder. He slipped the lotus brooch into his pocket, whispering, "One of you holds a truth more deadly than the desert, and soon I shall reveal it." Chapter 9. The Night of the Hidden Truth. Night draped itself over the Luxor excavation like a velvet shroud, muffling sound and thought in equal measure. The furious sandstorm had passed, leaving the camp eerily still, as though the desert itself held its breath in anticipation of what Hercule Poirot would uncover next. Lanterns flickered weakly in the windless air, casting halos across the ground that barely extended beyond a few feet, creating pockets of darkness into which any of the suspects might slip unnoticed. Poirot walked slowly through the camp, hands folded behind his back, studying every flutter of canvas, every shadow that moved against the tents. The lotus brooch in his pocket felt heavier now, not merely an ornament, but a silent accusation waiting for its voice. Lady Beatrice had yet to realize it was missing. Her absence from camp since dusk only fanned the flames of suspicion. But Poirot, ever cautious, refused to settle on a single narrative. A planted clue was as dangerous as a genuine one, and he sensed a cunning mind at work, one who understood how to manipulate perception. As he turned toward the central tent, he found Dr. Samuels pacing inside, muttering to himself, his hands shaking as he scribbled frantic notes across a torn notebook page. Poirot entered quietly. "You are troubled, monsieur." Samuels started, dropping his pencil. "Poirot! God, you startled me! I can't think straight. Too much is happening. Harrington is blaming me again. Nadine is nowhere to be found, and B, Lady Beatrice, she's vanished entirely. What if the curse is real?" Poirot's expression hardened slightly. "We have discussed this. There is no curse, only a criminal." Samuels collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his palms. "Then who among us could do all this?" Poirot studied him for a long moment. If Samuels were the culprit, he was either a brilliant actor or a man genuinely unravelling. "Tell me," Poirot said, "before he died, did Lord Winthrop ever confide in you?" Samuels hesitated, not verbally, but he left me this. He slid a sealed envelope across the table. Poirot opened it cautiously. Inside was a single line written in Winthrop's hand. "If anything happens to me, the truth lies with the Guardian." Poirot breathed deeply. Guardian! Again! The same warning Nadine had revealed earlier. The same word carved into the secret chamber. The Pharaoh's Guardian. But what, or who, was it referring to? Before Poirot could question Samuels further, a loud commotion erupted outside. Harrington's voice, brimming with fury, carried across the camp. Poirot rushed out to see the colonel dragging a struggling figure toward the lantern light, Nadine Hawthorne. Her hair was dishevelled, her cheeks streaked with dust, and her breaths came in ragged bursts. "Caught her sneaking toward the tomb again," Harrington barked. "She's hiding something, Poirot. Something big." Nadine ripped her arm from his grip. "Let go of me. I wasn't sneaking. I was searching for Beatrice. She's been missing since the storm." Poirot stepped forward. "Mademoiselle, where did you last see Lady Beatrice?" Nadine swallowed hard. "Near the ridge. She said she needed air. I followed after her when she didn't return, but the storm hit, and I lost my way." Harrington scoffed. "Convenient story." Poirot silenced him with a raised hand. "And why go to the tomb now?" Nadine's eyes glistened with fear and something else. Determination. "Because Lord Winthrop told me before his death that if anything ever happened to him, I should check the tomb's inner wall. But I don't know which wall. The scarab symbol appears in too many places." Poirot watched her closely. "Why did he trust you with this?" Nadine hesitated. "Because the secret he uncovered didn't just threaten history, it threatened reputations." Harrington stiffened. "Whose reputation?" Nadine's silence was answer enough. Poirot now knew 3 things. Winthrop had feared someone in camp. The missing journal page likely held the identity of that person. And someone was desperate enough to attack Poirot, destroy the scarab artifact, and silence Winthrop. But where was Lady Beatrice? Poirot formed a small search party, insisting Harrington, Samuels, and Nadine remain within sight. They combed through every ridge, every shadowed rock, until finally Poirot noticed something half buried in the sand, a trail of faint drag marks leading toward the tomb. "Mon Dieu," he whispered, "someone has taken her." They hurried to the tomb entrance. Poirot's lantern illuminated the first chamber, then the second. A soft whimper echoed from deeper within. They followed the sound, descending into the newly opened passage. There, in the dim light, they found Lady Beatrice slumped against the wall, wrists bound, eyes wide with terror. Samuels rushed forward, but Poirot stopped him. "Be careful. This scene, it is staged." Beatrice looked up at Poirot with trembling lips. I didn't want to go in. Someone grabbed me. They were wearing a scarf over their face. They kept saying I knew too much. But I don't know anything." Poirot knelt beside her. "Then why were you near the ridge alone?" Beatrice's eyes flickered with hesitation. I found something earlier, in Lord Winthrop's tent." Harrington's jaw clenched. "And you didn't tell us?" She shook her head, tears forming. "I was scared. I thought it might incriminate me." Poirot spoke gently. "Show us." Her hand trembled as she reached into her pocket and revealed a torn strip of parchment, the missing piece of Winthrop's journal page. Poirot unfolded it and read it aloud. "Do not trust the Guardian. The Guardian walks among us." A cold silence fell over the tomb, thicker than the desert night. Harrington stepped back instinctively. Nadine's breath hitched. Samuels whispered, "Guardian, among us." Poirot stood slowly, every piece of the puzzle aligning in his mind. "Yes," he said softly, "among us. And now, mes amis, I know who it is." A gasp rippled through the group. Beatrice trembled. Harrington's hand drifted toward his sidearm. Nadine's eyes widened in dread. Samuel's turned pale as salt. Poirot raised his lantern, casting long shadows across the chamber. "The Guardian," he declared, "is one of you." And as the flame flickered, the truth waited, breathing in the dark. Chapter 10. The Scarab's Final Secret. The tomb lay in silence, save for the distant echoes of shifting sand outside and the faint, deliberate breathing of those trapped within. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre of the chamber of whispers, his posture rigid yet calm, eyes sweeping over the 4 remaining members of the excavation team. Lady Beatrice clutched her shawl, fear etched deep into her face. Nadine's hands trembled slightly, the lantern light flickering across her tense features. Dr. Samuels had gone pale, as though the desert itself had drained him of colour, and Colonel Harrington's jaw was tight, his military composure wavering as unease began to gnaw at him. Poirot held the torn fragments of Lord Winthrop's journal in his hands, aligning them carefully on the stone pedestal. The missing line, combined with the final piece Beatrice had recovered, formed a sentence so simple yet so revealing. "Do not trust the Guardian. The Guardian walks among us." The words seemed to echo off the ancient walls, curling like smoke into every corner, filling the chamber with an invisible tension that tightened like a noose. Poirot's eyes swept over the group again. "Mes amis, the mystery is at its end. All that has transpired, the death of Dr. Hargrove, the staged curses, the attacks, the theft of the scarab artifact, can now be explained. But it required careful observation, attention to detail, and above all, the understanding of human nature." He stepped closer to Samuels, who shifted uncomfortably under the detective's piercing gaze. "Dr. Samuels, you were observed moving near the supply crates on the night of Hargrove's death. You claimed curiosity, yet your fingerprints were found on the ceremonial dagger used to pin the second threatening note. You returned it afterward, believing no one would notice the resin traces, yet they were observed." Samuels opened his mouth to protest, but found no words capable of absolving him. Poirot did not pause. "Colonel Harrington, you positioned the guards ineffectively to allow the intruder access, all while appearing to enforce security. You spoke of discipline, but your interest in the scarab and the hidden passages was more personal than official. However, these actions were distractions, carefully orchestrated to draw suspicion away from the true Guardian." Harrington's fist clenched. Poirot's gaze shifted, more intense than ever. "Nadine, your brilliance in deciphering the inscriptions brought you close to the truth. Yet it was your trust in Winthrop that marked you as an innocent player rather than the orchestrator. You risked your life following Lady Beatrice toward the ridge, unaware that the true danger had been manipulating events all along." The air grew heavier as Poirot's eyes fell on Lady Beatrice. She shrank back instinctively. "And now we come to you, Beatrice Winthrop, the Guardian, the one who has orchestrated every false curse, every threatening note, every shadowed movement through the tomb. You believed that by creating fear, by isolating us, you could preserve the secret of the scarab and maintain control of the excavation. You underestimated the intelligence and persistence of Hercule Poirot." Lady Beatrice gasped, her hands flying to her face. "No! You can't! You have it wrong! I didn't—" Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. "The evidence speaks plainly, madame. You accessed Lord Winthrop's tent before anyone else discovered the missing journal page. You followed him secretly when he investigated the hidden chamber. The torn parchment, the scarab's damage, the staged footprints all point to your actions. Your knowledge of his secrets combined with your understanding of human fear, allowed you to manipulate events, guiding suspicion toward others while you executed your plan. She shook her head violently, a mixture of terror and desperation in her eyes. I only wanted to protect him. I only wanted to... Her voice faltered, choked by emotion. Poirot's tone softened, but his resolve never wavered. Protection can take many forms, mademoiselle. Yet in your case, protection led to deception, danger, and death. Dr. Hargrove's death, though unintended in part, was hastened by your orchestration of events. The staged curse misled others and placed lives at risk, including your own. Beatrice collapsed onto the floor, her composure shattered. The others exchanged glances, shock and disbelief mingling with relief that the mystery had been solved. Poirot continued, turning to address all present. The scarab itself is no longer the object of desire, but rather a symbol of the consequences of ambition, greed, and fear. Its inner secret, the hidden chamber and inscriptions, were known to the Guardian alone. By attempting to control the narrative, the Guardian inadvertently caused chaos that ultimately revealed the truth. Samuel stepped forward shakily. Poirot, are you saying she's responsible for everything? Even the attack, the notes, the breakage of the scarab? Poirot inclined his head. Precisely. Each action was deliberate, designed to create the illusion of supernatural interference, to frighten and misdirect. The Guardian thought fear would protect the secret. Instead, it illuminated it. Harrington exhaled, running a hand down his face. I can't believe it. All this, and it was Lady Beatrice. Nadine added softly. She was careful, cunning, almost like a shadow moving behind the scenes. Poirot smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. A shadow, yes, but even shadows reveal themselves in the light. Courage, observation, and patience. These are the instruments with which truth is extracted. He gestured toward Beatrice, who remained huddled on the floor. You will be taken into custody, mademoiselle. The authorities will decide your fate, but know this, the scarab, the tomb, the secrets of Queen Ancana, these belong to history. Not to fear, not to ambition, and not to one individual's desire for control. Beatrice did not resist as Harrington and Samuels gently lifted her to her feet, guiding her toward the exit. Her eyes met Poirot's briefly, a silent mix of fear, shame, and a faint glimmer of recognition that her actions had been exposed, yet not without admiration for the detective's relentless mind. As the tomb emptied, leaving only Poirot and Nadine among the ancient walls, the detective walked slowly toward the hidden chamber one last time. He traced his gloved hand over the carvings, the faint light from his lantern highlighting every symbol. History, he murmured, is preserved not merely in gold or stone, but in the lessons left behind by human folly and courage alike. The scarab has revealed its secret, and the shadow that haunted this place has been banished by the truth. Nadine nodded, awe and relief reflected in her eyes. And the tomb? She asked softly. Poirot smiled gently. The tomb remains as it always was, a silent witness to ambition, greed, fear, and the power of intellect to illuminate what shadows seek to hide. Outside, the desert wind whispered, carrying away the last remnants of chaos, leaving only the eternal sands and the silent tomb. Poirot emerged lantern in hand to watch the sun rise once more over Luxor, the light spilling over dunes that had witnessed millennia of secrets. In that golden morning, he allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. The case was closed, the Guardian revealed, and the scarab's secret finally laid bare. Yet as always, Poirot mused, human nature would ensure that the desert silence was temporary, that secrets would one day stir again, and that the little grey cells would be needed once more. For now, however, Justice, truth, and intellect had prevailed, and the tomb slept, as it had for centuries, undisturbed at last.